Good morning, everybody. We're going to pull up our little presentation splash screen in 1 second. There we go. All right. I'm going to hover and wait a minute or two for everybody to trickle in, and then we'll get going. Watch our attendee list grow. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this public workshop. This is our second public workshop for the 2024 SHOPP Guidelines Update. My name is John Prey. I'm on the engineering team here at the Commission. We're excited to have you here. We are the SHOPP at the Commission, the engineering team, the SHOPP program. The engineering team provides oversight to the SHOPP program. And so we want to introduce ourselves first before we get going, if anybody doesn't know who we are. So like I said, my name's John Prey. On the engineering team. I'll let the two other people on camera introduce themselves. Tim, you want to go first?
Sure. Tim Solomon, Chief Engineer here at the Commission.
Ahmed Ghanem with the engineering team on the Commission.
And we used to have a fourth on the engineering team, but he's taken a temporary assignment. So it's the three of us right now. We already had a kickoff workshop for the SHOPP guidelines update that was all the way back in April. It's crazy how fast time goes. And so if you attended that, thank you. We got some good input there. And that was just to sort of get the juices flowing. The intent with this work, so we've had some dialogue in between then. We've put some red lines down on paper. The intent with this workshop was to, and we are going to go over specific changes that we've made. What we were not able to do before this workshop was to have all the changes worked out, send red lines out to people ahead of time, and then have this workshop. So, and we'll touch on this more at the end of the workshop. What I actually think we're going to do is review the changes in detail at this workshop, and then we might actually hold another workshop because we're hoping to get some input and feedback at this workshop on some specifics. And then we would like to hold a third workshop. Hopefully, the intent is probably in September, so a quicker turnaround than our last one, where we can actually send the red lines out ahead of time, give all of our stakeholders a couple weeks to see the specific changes that we're looking at making, and then have some feedback. So the goal is as much feedback as possible, and so that's what we're here for. We want to look at the changes, and then we'll hopefully have another one. Okay, you can hit the next slide, Ahmed. We're going to look at the agenda. We'll talk about how to participate, and then we'll start going through the changes. So here's our agenda. It's not too exciting. What will be exciting is the part that's inside that red circle right there. That's going to be the meat and potatoes of our workshop here today. The key areas of consideration, we'll touch on that. And then in that red circle, review proposed changes in detail, we're actually going to flop over to our Word document and just scroll through some of the changes that we're making, and look through everything that we're doing. So that's where we're hoping for interactive feedback and discussion as we go along. So on that note, discussion as we go along. Perfect timing, Ahmed. Two ways to participate. One is the raise hand feature. You'll find that on the bottom part of you should find that on the bottom part of your panel, little hand. Click the raise hand feature. We will unmute you and we'll call on you when it's your turn to talk. If you prefer, you can submit written comments. I think you'll see a chat and a Q&A. We prefer the written comments to be in the Q&A because then we have a record of what they were. We can better respond to them. So if you have a written comment that you would like to make, please put it in the Q&A, and then we will read that comment out loud on your behalf. Okay. Go ahead and we can hit the next slide. So this is, we're not gonna spend a lot of time here. We showed this at our kickoff workshop. I just kind of wanted a reminder of, these are some of the bigger level topics that we wanted to cover that sort of initiated us doing a guidelines update. We wanted to
John.
have some.
So I'm just gonna give one other thing.
Yeah.
I was just gonna mention, we're gonna go through all the proposed language changes and things like that. And so we can kind of get through it. So just letting people know that we'll come back to any sections that they want to go, have specific comments on. We can scroll back at the end of what you're going to present today.
Okay. Yeah. Good reminder. So these are just some of the areas that we were like, man, we should look at what's eligible, what's not. There's a section in there of eligibility. The program, there's so many different things that it does. It's important to talk about what the shop should be doing and what the shop should not be doing. Partnering projects, how can we keep the shop, the best partner possible with other non-shop stuff, but also shop funds paying for shop things. Alternative delivery is something that's developing, and we'll go through that. And then we have a couple changes that we're proposing in the timely use of funds, the time extension stuff, language. So with that, you can hit the next slide, Ahmed. Okay, this is where I'm going to steal the screen from Ahmed in just a second. We're going to walk through the proposed changes. I just want to say, as part of these proposed changes, these are not our final changes. We understand that these are still in draft form. They're subject to change. We have gotten some input, and we appreciate the people that we've gotten input from already. Today, the goal of today is to get live feedback on some of these changes that we're proposing. And so I'll walk through all of our proposed change sections. I think there's about 7 stops on our tour through the guidelines that we have, like, some, more meaty changes. There's some little stuff we're changing, but we got about 7 areas where we have some more meaty changes. And so I'll walk through those. And if you have a question on those, raise your hand, put it in the Q&A. And then, like Tim was saying, after we walk through those, if you have questions on a section where we didn't stop on our tour, I have a little yellow highlight on our little tour stops. If you have questions on other sections, we can always go back when we're done and talk about any section we want to. We'd love to hear feedback on any other section. So with that, I'm going to grab the screen. Yes. Okay. Tim, do you see the guidelines?
I can.
Great. Okay. No hands raised yet, right?
No.
Okay. You guys keep an eye on the hand raises. If anybody raises a hand, I'll stop and talk. Okay, so here's our guidelines. We're just gonna tour through. Table of contents. So we're not proposing any changes here. This is not an official tour stop when we get to guideline objectives. We're gonna send these out. We just added some words here to add some clarity, that transparent program development, project selection process. We added an acronym. So these are some of the non-substantive changes that we just kind of made as we were looking through. Non-substantive change, just updating to the latest G12 resolution number. Shop preparation. There's some, I really like the stuff that's in here, and we can come back to that if anybody has any questions about shop preparation and the stuff that's in there. This is the development schedule. So see the yellow on the side. I put yellow for the stops that I want to stop and talk about, and pause for questions. One of the areas that we are kind of always trying to improve is this shop eligibility. shop eligibility is defined up here in this government code 14.526.5. It's fairly general, and so that's why we have our guidelines zoom in a little bit more. 526.5, we don't directly quote it here, but it does say things like major capital improvements necessary to preserve and protect the state highway system. So key things there is, hey, it is for the state highway system, consistent with the transportation asset management plan. Projects included in the program are maintenance, safety, operation, and rehab. And so what the rest of this eligibility section does is it elaborates a little bit more on operation, or it also says does not add a new traffic lane. And so we said, we added a little bit of changes here to strengthen the not adding a new traffic lane. What we changed was, in other words, the addition of a lane to widen a highway instead of and thereby increase for the sole purpose of increasing the route. Maybe it doesn't even make that big of a difference, but we're just trying to zero in on like, look, if your purpose of a new lane is to increase the route's throughput capacity, that's what the SHOPP is talking about when it says it cannot add a lane. We try to be clear on that. Our interpretation is that it says traffic lane, and so there are some lanes that we feel are eligible, such as auxiliary lanes, left-hand turn lanes. When we put in a signal, lanes for cars to spread out into like a right turn lane. So that's what we're trying to do, is differentiate when we add a new 12-foot section of pavement. There are some times where that's SHOPP eligible. What's not eligible is if the sole purpose of this lane is to increase the route's throughput capacity. That's what the SHOPP is not here for. There are other programs that fund those types of improvements. So what we did here, we got some, let me read this note. We tried to strengthen the language for eligible safety and operational improvements while somewhat aligning it with the federal air quality conformity requirements. We were suggested by partners as we had some conversations that a lot of the things in this section are fairly similar to the air quality conformity exemptions. And while they're not the exact, they don't have the same goals. We tried to align some of our language with some of the stuff that it said in there. Some of them are kind of minor. I'll just go through them one by one, I guess. And they're not all tied to that. So this first auxiliary lane one, we wanted to, down where we say truck climbing lanes, we had already said we're justified based on an engineering analysis. And I kind of like that language because, and so we added it to the auxiliary lane part. Auxiliary lanes near ramps and interchanges to allow for safe acceleration and deceleration of entering and exiting vehicles. We're justified on the basis of an engineering analysis. We wanted to add a little bit of clarity that if you're going to add an auxiliary lane, there should be some sort of documentation, justification as to why we're adding an auxiliary lane. We had thought about putting length limits in here of auxiliary lanes. I like it better tying it to an engineering analysis so that because it's, stuff's not always black and white. So that's our goal, is to tie it to an engineering analysis in this one.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
Got a couple questions in the question area. I thought I'd just bring them up because it's related to the bottom of page 7. So the first question was, are there any state highway bridges that are one lane? Because widening from 1 to 2 lanes for safety should be eligible.
Oh, are there any state highway bridges that are one lane? Gosh, I don't know. Okay. That's a note we should probably follow up on.
Yeah. But the key part of that is for safety. And the SHOPP does facilitate the ability to make improvements for safety purposes. And then another question from an anonymous attendee. If a single project contained both a general purpose lane and an auxiliary lane justified for safe acceleration, would the shop be able to fund the aux lane portion of the work?
That is where, that's a good question. I think what we would do is we would fall back on the asset management plan prioritization of the shop. And where we rely on that because we go, the shop, there's a lot of statewide needs. And the current shop funding can cover about half of the statewide needs ballpark. And so the asset management plan and then the state highway system management plan are the planning documents that are used to prioritize improvements. And just because a general purpose lane is being put in doesn't suddenly make an auxiliary lane in that location a higher priority. And that's where the engineering analysis comes in. And so would it be eligible? I think auxiliary lanes in some cases are eligible, but would it be would it suddenly be rise to a level of priority of being funded by the shop? That's the decision that's where it can't be a yes or no answer. And we have to, that has to be evaluated. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Tim?
No, I think that's right in line with what we talked about in the past as well. In regards to eligibility versus priority and what would be in a project. So no, I think you did a good job responding to that one specific. And then there's another question that I think we're going to hit later on, but there's a question that says, is there an equity analysis in SHOPP processes? I think we're going to hit some areas along the way. And so maybe we'll hold off on that until we keep scrolling.
Yeah. And if that person wants to elaborate or provide some suggestions, I'd be interested in hearing that. We are in general, the shop tries to address equity by having great outreach and encouraging outreach and engagement wherever we can, and putting the resources where the needs are greatest. And, to us, I feel like those are the things we try to hit to try to make sure we keep our focus on equity. But if there are other suggestions and ideas related to that, we're open to hearing them. Okay, thanks, Tim. If there's other questions, please let us know. So some of these are more simple changes. We removed slow vehicle lanes. These are our truck climbing lanes on conventional highways and 4-lane freeways. We wanted to keep the focus on where justified on the basis of an engineering analysis. I really feel like that's going to be our best ticket to go to judge whether these, are appropriate or not, is based on an engineering analysis. Usually that would be documented in like a PID or a project report, some sort of public document. I used to say channelization projects. We're just clarifying to say intersection channelization projects. That's closer to the wording that was in the air quality conformity stuff. So we thought it was good to align with that. Shoulder improvements. This is also closer to the language that was in air quality conformity language. We added this one, and this is new. There may be dialogue associated with this one, but we've started to have questions from Caltrans about, hey, if we have an HOV lane and it is degrading and we need to improve the operations inside our HOV lane because so many people are using our HOV lane, can we use SHOPP funds as an operational improvement to either increase it from HOV2 to HOV3, or can we use SHOPP funds to use it as convert it to like a priced lane? And so that's why we added this, the conversion of an existing lane to a managed lane or the modification of an existing managed lane were justified on the basis of an engineering analysis. So this is new. There's still SHOPP. What we're saying is it's eligible operationally. There's a prioritization process in the SHOPP, looking at all the assets. But it is something that is being talked about as an eligible operational improvement. So we thought it would be good to highlight it.
John,
That's the end of this section. Any questions?
Yeah, we have we have one caller that would like to speak. And before we go to the caller, I think, are they called callers when it's a Zoom? I'm not sure. We have a Zoomer that would like to speak. But also we have a question that said, can you confirm that multimodal corridor improvements or projects would include transit-only lanes?
Can you confirm that multimodal corridor projects would include transit-only lanes? That sounds like a new lane, but I think that would need to be something that we would need to flesh out. So I guess I would scroll back up and go, is that a new lane? For the sole purpose of increasing the route's throughput capacity. It sounds like that would be a new lane, but I would be happy to hear more discussion on that if there's a further question on that. But to me, that sounds like a new lane that's prohibited in statute, and so our guidelines can't override statute.
Just a follow-up to that, someone mentioned as a conversion of a general purpose lane or shoulder into a transit-only, bus-only facility. So I think we would need to flesh that out a little bit more. But I do want to make sure we go to our Zoomers today. So
First,
there you go. Thank you.
so first speaker we have is Sutha. You should be able to speak. Let me know.
Good morning, Tim. John.
Hey, Sutha.
A quick question on the last one, the conversion of an existing lane to a managed lane. Are you going to consider like a GP lane to managed lane also eligible? Or you might want to clarify, it's just a comment.
When you say GP, to manage lane, do you mean GP to like an HOV or like GP to toll?
Either or.
Either or.
It's a managed lane. You are keeping it as a generic term, right? Managed lane.
Yeah. Yep.
Be to a managed lane, most probably going to be a toll.
What?
But will that be eligible under the SHOPP?
That's a good point. And there are, as you know, there are other laws that govern what's allowed and not allowed. What we're trying to say is, if you want to use SHOPP funding for something like that, that would be an operational improvement. But that's good input. I think we're going to have to think about how this ties in with other laws around that stuff.
Okay, yeah, just a comment. So maybe consider, maybe if you want to expand that sentence. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sutha. I think this was the first time we had this in here, and so we definitely need to get the wording correctly. So thank you for the comment. I have a couple other written questions or comments. Go ahead, Ahmed, did you have someone else that wanted to speak first?
Yes, we have one more speaker, Sean Kaijin.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is Sean over up in Shasta, over at Certain up in Shasta County. Following up on that related to the new N, I had that same question about whether you're talking about general purpose lane to managed lane. I know there's different rules, as I'm told, about the process for that, depending on how you go from general purpose to HOV to toll, etc. But as you all know here too, we have a TSET funded project that is changing general purpose lane to a managed freight only lane. So I just mentioned that. So as you think about how to provide clarity, you might want to expand that to address those other elements, I think, which I think are eligible as an operational improvement and as a safety improvement with different projects that you guys have funded through various programs when you look at that. So I would just want to make sure that, maintenance of those freight managed lanes also could be written into this.
Yeah. really
And
good, really
yeah,
good input. Go
yeah,
ahead.
the other thought I had, and it's not a comment of mine, but about that multimodal corridor project idea, might want to look at that about the question about transit only lanes, because in some areas, if you have some areas do a BRT, bus rapid transit, right? And that may be a separate lane, but it's dedicated solely for the operational improvements of transit and to encourage people to use transit. So, that is an interesting question, and it might be something you might want to think about it, how, certain elements, depending on facilities, especially if you're talking about other state highways that have smaller sections through different communities or main streets, where highways are going through, about what might, be eligible. So that way you're able to improve the operational needs and safety needs, to encourage the use of transit. So I just mentioned that as another comment as you think about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're not trying to, with this long one that's added, there's a lot of nuance and discussion with regards to what can and can't be done with converting these lanes, and we're not trying to flush all that out with this. We're trying to say if funding is used for those and it's an operational improvement, I think we're gonna have to work on that one a little bit. So thanks for the input on that one.
So, John, we have one more speaker that would like to talk, Kenneth Cow.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is Kenneth Cow with MTC. I wanted to kind of tag on to Sean's comments. I thought those were some great comments. And when you mentioned BRT, I was kind of reminded of something else that we are working on here, and that is bus on shoulder. And so I know that's kind of a bigger conversation with Caltrans, but that's another, I would argue, operational improvement where, potentially SHOPP funds could be used to make the shoulder able to be used by buses to, queue jump and get people out of single occupancy vehicles and into transit. So that could be another thing to add as a part of the operational improvements here in the SHOPP guidelines.
Okay, thank you, Kenny. This is all helpful. It's a hard balance between operational improvements and when does something, that's why we try to define, like, when does something become considered a new lane? I think I'd have to scratch my head and think about, if we fortify a shoulder so buses could run on it, is that a new lane all of a sudden?
Yeah, or it could be like, you just make that shoulder a little bit safer for broken down vehicles. I don't know. This is definitely a bigger conversation that we'll need to have if this is something that we're interested in adding, but I would like to have that, conversation started. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
John, I have a couple comments, questions to mention here. Carter Rubin says, I support ability to use SHOPP funds to manage lanes with pricing. Would modifying an existing managed lane include converting an existing carpool or price lane to general purpose? That would not be desirable.
Sean, may I add a little bit to this?
Yeah.
So we will go back and look at N because the federal laws allow the require the maintaining the number of free lanes, with the exception of the conversion of HOV to managed lane. But we got some really good questions that, worth considering, and we will go back and, we've taken notes of all the comments that have been provided, and we'll go back and revise as needed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good comment. And Carter, thank you for your input. We certainly don't see that as a trend. I have not heard that being proposed anywhere. But yeah, we'll take a look at that.
John, I got a couple more.
Yeah.
Jose Luis says, what is a multimodal corridor project? We should define it or at least provide examples. I do. There's a section later on that does talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, let's just go down there real quick. We're not leaving this section, but we'll leave it for 1 second. Just so close your eyes if you get seasick. We're blowing past some of our other stops, but we're gonna come back to our stops. There it is. This does not provide, Jose Luis, that's a good question, and probably could use some clarity. This is something it's not new. It's been in the guidelines for a long time. SHOPP eligible multimodal corridor projects may be programmed in the SHOPP and consistent with the asset management plan and the state highway system management plan. A corridor is defined as a largely linear geographic band defined by existing and forecasted travel patterns involved in both people and goods, serves a particular travel market or markets affected by similar transportation needs and mobility issues, includes various modes that provide similar or complementary transportation functions, including cross-mode connections. All that to say, probably still not super clear. What would be SHOPP eligible? So that's a good comment, and I like what you're saying about we should provide if we're going to have that in there, we should probably provide examples of what would and wouldn't be eligible. Thank you.
Here's another one, John, as you scroll back up. If the RTP and a corridor plan include high priority projects on the state highway system, replacing a segment of GP, is it eligible for funding under section M, which is the multimodal corridor? I think we have to provide some additional clarity in regards to M. Yeah,
we'll provide some additional clarity. And again, I would just remind everyone on the call that the SHOPP has a lot of assets and a lot of needs, and it has a prioritization process. So operational improvements, although important, don't tend to get the bulk of the SHOPP funding. There are pavement targets we need to meet and bridge targets we need to meet, and those things honestly soak up a lot of the SHOPP funding. And what we have available for operational improvements, we're trying to say these are available for operational improvements, and that's where the state highway system management plan is used to prioritize the amount of funding that we can put to these types of things. And so if there is funding available to put there, then there would need to be a discussion on what we're trying to say is it's eligible, and we'll have to see if it rises to a priority in our funding. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Tim. We're going to have to, clearly this opens up some ideas of improvements that can be made. And so maybe we should flesh this one out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely with some additional clarity. Another question came in. Jeannie Ward-Waller asked, can you clarify the eligibility for shoulder improvements?
Wait, can you say that one more time?
Sure. Can you clarify the eligibility for shoulder improvements?
Can you clarify the eligibility for shoulder improvements? We can look at that. Off the cuff right now, I don't know that I could, because there's a lot of different things you could probably do to shoulders. But Jeannie, thank you for that point. I think we have even talked about, man, should there be more language attached to this bullet? So because we're going to have another workshop, why don't we take that comment back, and then we'll see if there's additional description we can add to that to sort of tease out what would be allowed and what wouldn't be allowed with shoulder. I appreciate that.
I think and maybe I'm not sure, but maybe the question is coming up because we changed the word widening to improvements. And there's work that to be done on shoulders that are related to different types of purpose and need of a project, whether there's a 2-foot shoulder and it needs to go to a 4-foot shoulder or a standard shoulder, whereas in the past, it's an old road and they just had as minimal as possible. And so, those are appropriate SHOPP eligible type things. But yeah, we can definitely tease it out a little bit more if needed.
Thanks, Gene.
Couple more. Oh, I see. And Ahmed, go ahead. Why don't you go next? Because it looks like we have someone on. We have a Zoomer that's looking to speak that I just referenced.
All right, I'll go ahead and call on Jeannie to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm in a noisy place, but I appreciate the response, and I just want to clarify the question that I just asked, John. I think because you had changed that from shoulder widening to shoulder improvements, and actually maybe in a couple of these other eligibilities, like for the aux lanes, where it sort of says justified by engineering analysis. I'm just concerned about the ways that SHOPP projects might be used to add additional pavement, you know, as a shoulder initially, but ultimately maybe converted to a GP lane. It often happens with linking aux lanes together as well. So I was just curious if in modifying these eligibilities, you could be a little bit more clear about sort of what you mean by improvements and what are those eligible improvements.
Okay.
So maybe adding some more description about what qualifies as an improvement. Thanks.
Happy to. Yeah. We have some ideas, you know, do we tie it to standards and not go beyond standards? But we thought, man, if we tie that to standards here, that implies that other stuff is not to standard, but maybe there is. Thank you for the clarification, Jeannie. I think there is some stuff that we can add to further clarify what, you know, what the SHOPP should be funding. So we'll take a look, and then you'll have a chance to see red lines when they come out. And, you know, if you want to provide more written comments, we're going to talk about that at the end of this. We'd love to see them. You'll see further language before we have our next workshop. So thanks for the input on that.
And just for everybody on the line, I'm scrolling through all the Q&A and I'm getting like questions or comments clarifying previous ones. So I apologize if I'm like not staying on top of it. I'm trying to go in line here. I do have one more. What about shoulder widening for bikeable shoulders? What if the shoulder widening requires retaining walls?
What about shoulder widening for bikeable shoulders? I mean, I don't see that is not eligible. You know, what I want to remind everybody is we always go, is it eligible? Is it a priority? I don't think that would be ineligible. I don't know, Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say that I've seen projects that have done it, and so I would say it is SHOPP eligible, but depending upon like what is required and, you know, the best solution for what they're trying to do, it'd be part of the consideration process. But I would rely on Caltrans as, you know, to be evaluating it and documenting it. But as an eligibility perspective, I would say it would be eligible.
Yeah, I've seen Caltrans go from a 1 foot shoulder on a rural road to an 8 foot shoulder. And one of the benefits is, hey, now bikes can go there. You know, it may not be appropriate for a bike lane, but it allows for bikes on that shoulder. So it seemed like it would be eligible. And yeah, I agree with you, Tim. Caltrans can evaluate that.
And just one other comment, but not really a question. An anonymous attendee said, I would think shoulder improvements could include widening safety edges, shoulder backing, rumble strips. That's correct. You know, and from the widening perspective, widening is just kind of a controversial term. And so it's more like we're not looking, you know, shoulders need to have a basis of what they're widening to. That's why we kind of switched it to improvements. Okay. Anyway, John, that's all I have so far. We have we do have one more Zoomer caller inner. Ahmed.
All right, I'll go ahead and call on William Walker.
Hi, my name's William. Oh, you just said it, so my apologies. And I'm in a loud place. Oh. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for 1 second. We cannot, we don't hear any of your loudness, and we can hear you clearly. So go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that I dropped the equity processes in the chat, and the reason I asked is because I think that it's very relevant to all the comments that have just been made about shoulder improvements. I think about 19th Avenue in San Francisco, where there's now an HOV lane, which isn't standard for you know, street running state highways and that I know of in California. And so I think that some unique things can be done if we're thinking about if a change has to be done, can it be made safer for modes that reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? And because that's also a safety issue if you live in a community with a freeway or with high traffic volumes, and looking at curb cuts and making sure that if a shovel's going down, that we're looking at all of those things and creating a point system so that the projects that make the highway system most safe and reduces traffic, reduces vehicle trips should be uplifted on the list and prioritized versus maintenance projects that don't.
Thank you. Yes, we did those.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. Appreciate the input.
Okay, John, that's all I have. We can keep going on the document,
On the tour.
on the tour.
Okay. If you have more comments that you did not make, we will be accepting written comments after this. So, and we'll touch on that at the end of the workshop till the end of next week is when we're planning on accepting written comments. This is a little preview. Okay, so we didn't change anything in section 13, 14, project budget, milestone dates, database, TAMP. Nothing is changing the TAMP section. Nothing's changing the state highway system management plan section. So this is our next tour stop. It is, you know what I'm gonna do? No, I like the page numbers. Okay, there's nothing on the next page. I'm gonna do it like this so you can see the whole thing. We tried to add a little more clarifying language on jointly funded projects to increase transparency about when SHOPP funds are being used with non-SHOPP. And so we want to be clear to ourselves, be clear to the public, be clear to everybody that the SHOPP is paying for SHOPP work and non-SHOPP funds are being used to fund the non-SHOPP work. So we've just tried to strengthen the language a little bit, particularly this section. So propose improvements to be funded by each program. Oh, execute a co-op agreement to reflect the improvements funded by each program for each project phase. Funds shall not be expended for a jointly funded project for the execution of co-op agreement. So this is the one that Caltrans kind of already does. We're just putting it in there. You'll see sometimes in the SHOPP document, like if you look in the 2024 SHOPP and you look for a word contribution, you'll see that there's a project and it has a project description, and then it says local contribution from the city of Anytown of this much for PNED, this much for PSNE, this much for, and it just kind of breaks down, hey, there's a local contribution for this project. And we added this in there just to ensure that that practice continues so that we and everyone is aware when a SHOPP project is being combined, jointly funded and combined with a non-SHOPP project, just so there can be extra clarity of here's the SHOPP work, here's the non-SHOPP work. They have different funding sources because there are some scopes of work that are not eligible to be funded by the SHOPP. Are there any questions on this section? I think that's all I have to say about this section.
So John, we have one speaker with a raised hand. I'll call on Jose Luis.
Hi, everyone. Jose Luis Casas here at Stancog. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, I have a question that's sort of argumentative, but I'm asking for a little clarification. So I'm going to read the line. It says, funds shall not be expended for a jointly funded project before the execution of a cooperative agreement and funding commitment. I think, I don't know if I want you to add it here, but I think I do. I'd like it to be added that you can still get an allocation before a cooperative agreement. You just can't have an expenditure before a cooperative agreement. The reason I'm pointing this out is I think we waited 6 months for a cooperative agreement here in 2023. And there was just this huge argument of whether you could get an allocation or a federal authorization before having an executed cooperative agreement. And this is usually what I see is that you can't expend before a cooperative agreement. In other words, you can't get something called it's called a PSA. But man, I really do not like delaying authorizations and allocations while we're waiting for, the people to decide what the percentage is going to be of state and local funds for cost increases.
Thank you. That's a good comment that I think we'll have to take back and talk about. I will tell you, I think our intent, we almost equate allocation, like we almost equate, at least on our side, when we provide an allocation, that's providing authorization to expend. I hear what you're saying. I think we're going to have to think about, be careful with our words here, and we're going to have to think about whether we would be comfortable making an allocation if there's no cooperative agreement.
Please. And then I think now we're reaching the limits of my knowledge. Do some SHOPP project and phases not require an allocation? Is like PE or PNED or something can move forward without an allocation?
No, they all have to be, all SHOPP phases require an allocation.
You're sure about that?
Yeah, that started with the passage of SB1.
Okay.
So before SB1, you were correct. Pre-construction did not require an allocation, only construction. But in 2017, after SB1, now all pre-construction phases require an allocation.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, John, there is a written comment that I believe is related to eligibility. It comes from Christine Penrod. New asset / goal in the SHSMP on terrestrial wildlife connectivity should be included in the examples list. Improving culvert bridge assets in poor condition, upgrading, upsizing to be more amenable to wildlife movement. I think we'll take that into consideration. We'll think about that one. I mean, I think that what's listed up there would facilitate culverts and bridges. The work itself is eligible. It sounds to me like it's more about the purpose of that work. But John, go ahead.
So appreciate the input, and we'll take a look at where it fits. The list that we were talking about up above, and I know we're off of it now. It says examples of SHOPP eligible operational improvement projects. So that list was specifically supposed to be elaborating, providing examples of operational improvements. So I don't know if wildlife connectivity would fit into that list, but comment noted, should somewhere we address that wildlife connectivity projects can be funded with SHOPP funds. And again, I'll go back to prioritization. If they're able to be prioritized against all the other needs. But we do have some wildlife connectivity projects funded with SHOPP projects. So it might be worthwhile for us to see if that clarification fits somewhere. So thank you for that comment. I took a note of it.
I'd also like to add another comment that's related to this, to Jose Luis' discussion. It says, getting an allocation way before getting an executed co-op gets tricky with timely use of funds with SHOPP funds.
Oh,
I think that's a good thing to consider as well.
yeah, that's true.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, that's all for this section. Sounds like it. Happy to come back if we want. Okay, we're gonna move forward in our tour. Nothing here, no changes here. Project level information and PIDs. We're not proposing, we made some changes to this last time. We're not proposing any changes this time. Our projects are selected, sequential programming. So this is the next stop on our tour, is alternative delivery methods. As you guys know, as probably most people on this call know, it's newish. Alternative delivery methods are newish. You know, they've been around for a little while, but certainly stuff continues to change a lot more than our tried and true design bid build stuff. And so what we did was, there's sort of two sections in the SHOPP guidelines that address alternative delivery method. There's 29, which is sort of like an intro general, and then I think it's 40 down below, which talks about allocating funds, and we made a lot more changes down below. So what I'll say right here, I know a lot more changes, seems like we changed everything. What we did here was we tried to just, we took what was currently pretty specific, where it would say the CMGC delivery method should be identified. If you're going to use CMGC, projects using design build or design sequencing should be identified. So it was sort of specific to those two. And now we've introduced progressive design build. You know, I don't think we're using job order contracting yet in the SHOPP, but we might. You know, there's just, our alternative delivery methods have expanded a little bit. And so what we did with this language was we just kind of restructured it to make it more general. SHOPP projects using an alternative delivery method, for example, CMGC, design build, progressive design build, job order contracting, etc. I read the first part wrong. SHOPP projects may use an alternative delivery method in accordance with statutory authority. Projects using an alternative delivery method should identify the alternative delivery method at the time of programming. It's sort of like I was saying, when we combine a SHOPP and a non-SHOPP, put a note in the programming box. We want the same thing so that we're transparent. When we select to use an alternative delivery method, we should amend our programming just to simply say, this project will use a progressive design build method. This project will use design build, CMGC. Particularly because the delivery method changes the dollar amounts we have in different program to different phases. You know, design build is going to have a lot more dollars programmed to construction because it's going to cover some design stuff and things like that. So the goal of this section is to just rewrite more general to say, SHOPP projects may use an alternative delivery method. And if you do, that should be identified in the programming document. And that's, with all these scratches outs, that's kind of what we're trying to say. And then we, you know, in the note, see section 40 for more specifics. So we can talk more specifics when we get down to 40. Is there any questions on this? If you have a question that you're thinking about asking about alternative delivery methods, and it doesn't seem like it applies here, maybe just hang on to it till we get to 40, because we have some more specifics down in section 40.
So John, we have a written question. Does this mean the alternative delivery method should be called out in the FDIP project description?
Oh, now we're getting to the limit of my knowledge, because I'm not super familiar with how SHOPP project descriptions get programmed and then moved to the FTIP. So I don't know, but we'll write that down and we'll have some conversations about
it.
So
We
there's-
also have,
Go ahead, Ahmed.
we also have another written question from Jamie. I wanted to flag the SB 960 pending legislation may require changes to a few sections you skipped over, like the TAMP and the state highway system management plan sections.
Okay. Okay, we'll take a look at that legislation and see how it might affect those sections. Those sections say SHOPP should be in accordance with the TAMP. SHOPP should be in accordance with the SHSMP. And in the development of the SHSMP, incorporate CAPDI and equity statement. We're going to need to take a look at that SB 960 and see. We sort of tried to keep the guidelines kind of general, and if SB 960 changes the TAMP and SHSMP, the shop would just sort of follow along as a trailer to those planning level documents. But we'll read that specific legislation and see if we need to propose any changes in there. So thanks for drawing our attention to it.
Hey, John, we also have another comment related to eligibility from an anonymous attendee. We have this anonymous attendee has mentioned a bunch of them, so I'm not sure who it might be, but it says that districts are requesting to invest SHOPP funds off system where it makes sense to close gaps in the bike and ped network, especially where the state route is the main road between communities. What can we do to help the districts? An example was the state rail corridor adjacent to the freeway, but not in the right of way.
We have historically interpreted the statute according to what it says, where it says capital improvements on the state highway system. Go ahead,
John, maybe I can help in and jump in on that. We encourage the districts, the funds, all transportation funds are, there's not only the SHOPP program, there are other programs. So when situation where we see there are improvements that are needed off the state highway system, we encourage the districts to work with their local partners, the regional transportation agencies, to identify funding for those improvements. Like John said, the statute is clear that the SHOPP for state, for work on the state highway and operation system, Caltrans, or there is a SHOPP project that impacts, that connects to a local road. Oftentimes, that SHOPP project will provide the necessary improvement to create a smooth transition. So that way there is that connectivity, but it's not really intended to veer off, for extended distances, outside the state right.
Yeah, thanks, Ahmed.
And just real quick, Jose Luis, I do see your hand. If you still have a comment, and it's gone. Thank you. Just want to make sure we didn't miss a comment. Okay, John.
Okay. More alternative delivery to come. This is not a tour stop. It's talking about what happens to contingency projects that are programmed for a particular year that don't get fully funded. So this will be a discussion that we further have with Caltrans, but our suggestion is that contingency projects, if they're planned for a certain year, they should be funded at the end of that year. And I know we can't fund, I know the idea of contingency projects is that we program more than what we have funding for so that we have a shelf. Our suggestion is that when we get to the end of the year, if we did not fund these because there was not enough sufficient funding, we have been told that they're the same priority, or that they don't have any lower priority just because they're a contingency project. So it seems like they would be first in line for funding in the following year. That's a conversation I think we need to flush out with Caltrans. But that's what this language is getting at, so that we don't have unfunded projects with zero construction dollars that we're issuing time extensions for. It seemed like that portion didn't make any sense. So anyway, that's conversation. It's no yellow. It's not an official tour stop. It's more of a specific nuance with how Caltrans manages the shelf of projects in the shop. There's our multimodal corridor section, environmental process, programming combined shop and non-shop projects, escalations. So now we're into the allocations section. Delegated safety, delegated emergency response. We have the minor program. We're just deleting a simple word here. allocates to support and construction. We didn't want to imply that we only allocate exactly the programmed amount because there's flexibility there in other parts of the guidelines. That's just a minor change. Again, modifying some minor language, not a big change. It seemed like the current wording read that every allocation must have a current estimate presented to the commission. We expect them to be based on current estimates, but the expectation is not that they're presented to the commission. So we wanted to be a little more clear. Of course, we can always ask for the estimate, but we didn't want to have our guidelines imply that if 50 allocations come before the commission, 50 engineers' estimates have to also yes. We just added progressive design build in there. We'll go to our next tour stop. So here's section 40, alternative delivery method projects. We've worked with Caltrans. We've worked some with regional agencies. We just appreciate your guys' partnership as we all are all kind of figuring out how these alternative delivery methods proceed. So the way this is broken down is we have CMGC first, and then we talk about CMGC. I'll come back up to this. So that's all CMGC stuff. And then we have a design build section. And then we have a progressive design build section. And then that's the end of this section. So right now we have specifics on allocation for CMGC, design build, and progressive design build. And what we did was we took our existing language. We didn't change the first paragraph. We had a little bit of language about dividing it into work packages, and we just are elaborating on that a little bit more. So we said early work packages will be approved by the commission through an amendment. That's what we do right now. We just wanted to, it's not in the guidelines anywhere. So we wanted our process to start becoming documented in the guidelines. To allow flexibility, the commission will allow an amendment in the year delivery. We also currently do that. That's saying, look, if we want to break off packages and we're in the year delivery, the guidelines will allow that. Excuse me. We already do the second one as well. A list of anticipated work package, their delivery years, scopes of work, and cost estimates must accompany the initial allocation requests, and subsequent requests must provide an updated list. Caltrans does this whenever we split off and allocate an early work package in a CMGC project. There's a corresponding informational item that just spells out, this is an early work package. Here's the early work packages we're expecting. They're for these other scopes of work and these dollar amounts. It's very helpful. I think it's in line with FHWA's requirements of looking at the whole entire project scope and cost estimate when you're, prior to approving the first or any early work package. So we got that one in there. This looks like it's being deleted, but it just got morphed into A. These kind of came from FHWA. Allocations for early work packages will not be approved prior to the completion of NEPA and CEQA. That came from FHWA, but we thought it was important enough to repeat. This also came from FHWA guidance. Early work packages are for minor elements, not to be used to piecemeal construction of the project. We acknowledge that there's a lot of subjectivity in what meets that criteria. And we don't think the guidelines can exactly spell out what should or shouldn't be an early work package, but this just provides, some groundwork for a conversation to be had. And then the last thing we added is that it's recommended Caltrans consult with commission staff when developing early work packages. And this down here is current practice. We're trying, like I said in the beginning, we're trying to kind of codify these procedures we've sort of adopted in allocating early work packages. We'll consider an allocation of construction funds when it receives a request from Caltrans. Prior to requesting an allocation for any work package or for the entire project, like an early work package or the entire project, Commission expects Caltrans to certify PS&E is complete. Agreed to price has been reached. Constraints are cleared for environmental and right-of-way. All necessary permits and agreements, including railroad construction and maintenance, are secured. We already currently do that. That's how we're operating. At least that's my understanding with how we're operating with allocating CMGC projects. And so it's not meant to upend what we're currently doing. We're trying to sort of codify this process that we've been developing as we've been going along, kind of. I'm going to pause here before we get to design build and progressive design build. Are there any CMGC questions?
I don't see anything, John. And no hands raised as well.
Okay. We didn't make any changes to the design build section. Design build is, not quite as popular as the CMGC method, but I feel like this is pretty good. And a lot of this language came from Caltrans, helped us out with this language. It's just saying when the allocation's made in the scope of like when the RFQ goes out, when the RFP goes out, and all that kind of stuff. So no changes proposed there. Progressive design build is, we've not done a lot of progressive design build. We thought it was important to add in here because there are a couple projects that Caltrans is starting to propose to use progressive design build on. We didn't want to start making allocations to an alternative delivery method where we had no guidelines. And I know Caltrans is developing some good guidelines for progressive design build as well. But those are still under development. So we acknowledge that a lot of this stuff is under development. A lot of this, like these bullets, mimic the CMGC bullets. Progressive design build sort of is like a blend of CMGC and design build. So this is, very similar to CMGC language. All we added was words like, if a progressive design build project is divided into separate early work packages or delivery contracts. And we added stuff like that because CMGC splits off construction work packages. Progressive design build may split off a design and construction package, like little mini design build packages. That's what we were trying to clarify by adding that. And then this is all pretty much the same as CMGC up there. And then we said, in collaboration with the Commission, Caltrans shall develop guidance for each alternative delivery method and shall review and update the guidance periodically based on lessons learned and updates state and federal laws. Caltrans has guidance for delivery methods. I like their guidance. It's been very helpful for us to kind of walk through and look through. So we're sort of just strengthening the partnership there to say, hey, they have guidance. They're going to update their guidance. Any questions, comments on alternative delivery methods from anybody?
I don't see anything, John.
Okay. Well, then let's carry on. If a hand goes up, I can come back. Okay, so we have a little bit of a gap. So we're getting into timely use of funds requirements. This is for pre-construction. No changes here to our timely use of funds requirements for the shop. Here's timely use of funds for right-of-way support and capital. We just took out a legacy statement. This policy applies to right-of-way support or capital that have occurred beginning with June of 2017. That's not needed anymore. Just doing a little cleanup work. June 2017 was a long time ago. Timely use of funds for construction capital. Timely use of funds extension. So this is going to be one of our stops. Maybe our last stop. This is when a time extension is needed. Acceptable time extensions are as follows: allocation time extension, pre-construction expenditure time extension, contract award time extension, construction completion time extension, And then we get down here. So I'm going to put them all on the screen. I'm going to talk through each of them. No changes to C. Commission may allow a one-time extension of up to 20 months for unforeseen and extraordinary circumstances. This is new, and we're a little bit like, should we be adding this? If you've been watching commission meetings, you have seen time extension amendments down at the bottom of the agenda, and they're not allowed in commission program guidelines right now. They're exceptions to guidelines. We're amending time extension. And in this program, what we have said is we're doing it, we're allowing it. Should we make it part of the guidelines? We think the benefit, so in a way it would like legalize what we're already doing. So the question is, should we not be doing it at all? Or should we legalize it and put it in our guidelines? We think the benefit of allowing amendments to time extensions. So a key thing here in this new clause is will only be allowed for durations that would keep the total additional time within the 20-month limit. So our intention is not to go beyond 20 months, but our intention is to say, if you know you only have one time extension and there's some risk built in, you can ask for a bunch of time to account for all your risk. Our goal is to have more accurate and shorter initial time extensions. You know, if you think you can deliver it in 6 months, but the world might blow up and you would need 16. If you only got one, you're going to ask for 16. What we want to do is go, no, ask if you're 90% sure you can get it in the 6, ask for the 6, because we want to keep our foot on the gas. And then if something blows up and you need to amend it, the commission will allow an amendment. So the goal is better and better. The goal is shorter initial time extension requests if we know that this isn't our only chance, our only chance at all. That's the goal. The rest of these, and we'll take questions on that in a minute if there are any. The rest of these are kind of related to that. Well, actually not this one. So pause on the amendment thought for a second.
We do have a question.
This one, oh yeah, is there a question?
Yeah, Ahmed, are you there?
I'll stop for a question.
Let me call on, we have two questions actually I have two hands raised. First, I'll call on Jose Luis.
Hey, I'll just ask my basic question. Is there a limit to the number of time extensions?
Like amendments that we would approve?
Yes.
We are currently, the current language would say there's not a limit. The limit would come at the 20-month mark. So you could ask for 6, you bump it to 9, bump it to 12. And it seems kind of tedious, but no, at this point, we're not specifying a limit because we feel like a limit goes back to our similar problem of going, well, gosh, if I only got 2 and I asked for 6, I better ask for all 20 on the second one. So no, currently we're not proposing a limit.
And I also do not propose one. I have to say this is a breath of fresh air. It also, what this feels like is an experiment to see if this is a better way of doing things. And I applaud you guys on this experiment. I think this might work. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the input. It does feel a little bit like an experiment. We're hopeful.
I'll call on Kenneth Cow.
All right, thank you. Kenneth Cow, TC again. I also wanted to add thanks to really spelling this out, because for my local projects, I tell them to ask for as much as they think they need, right? So I've had instances where they had, like, I don't know, an environmental issue and they asked for 6 months and then they had a bid protest or something, right? Which you can't foresee a bid protest. And then all of a sudden they run out of time and then they lose the funds. So I really appreciate this to really recognize that sometimes even when you ask for an extension, there's additional unforeseen and extraordinary circumstances. And I hope that eventually this will extend to other programs as well if it hasn't already. Thank you.
Thank you for the input. Yeah, we would. That's why we're holding the 20-month limit, because we're like, man, we got to draw a line somewhere. We can't keep kicking it out forever. But like you said, Kenny, sometimes something comes up and we're like, maybe, and they go, I should have just asked for 20 from the beginning, which we don't think we really want. So yeah, thank you for the support there. And
I also appreciate highlighting the unforeseen and extraordinary, because that's really the intent of what these are for. You know, we're not trying to manage projects by time extensions, but like when something comes up, that's what they're there for. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more comments and raise your hand Q&A as we go through. This is little change, and I think this is mostly Caltrans, not local. Excuse me. The request to extend or amend the deadline for any of the above must be, we used to have approved by the commission prior to the expiration date. Seems like if you have 36 months, you can make it before the expiration date. But we were running into issues where a construction project, for example, was going to be completed by the end of whenever. And we pass a commission meeting, still think it's going to finish, and then something happens in construction and they need 2 more months. Well, we can't get to a commission meeting in between then. And so now we're requesting it's a post fact. And we're like, I hate post facts. But something came up in between commission meetings. And so what we are suggesting here is we're just going to change it to submitted to the commission prior to the expiration date and see if we can eliminate post facts and account for that. I think locals have a slightly different process than when it's just Caltrans and SHOPP. I think on local projects, the request gets submitted to Caltrans, and so they don't run into that problem of, oh shoot, we're past the commission meeting, but now we're in this no man's land and something went wrong. So anyway, that's the intent there, a little more Caltrans focused there. Then here, okay, so this is, again, not about amendment. This F is not about amendments. It's also a little bit of an experiment. We received a lot of allocation time extensions late in the fiscal year. And it makes sense that allocation time extensions have to come by June. So historically, they've all come in June. I think some programs see some of them in May. What we're experimenting with is suggesting, if you know you're going to need 12 months or more, let's bring those to the March meeting so that we can identify issues and bring them to light sooner rather than all the way at the end of the final commission meeting where everything, where everything's expiring if we don't do it right then. So that's the goal with this one, is to bring issues to light sooner. Again, it's an experiment. Again, we're trying to figure out the language and what makes sense. And we sort of said, does May make sense? Well, May's, almost on top of the June meeting. So did we accomplish much by May? So anyway, it's kind of where we landed on where and how we landed on March. I think we're going to experiment with it and see how it works.
Hey, John, I have a couple comments that just came in. Brianna Goodman says, is there an opportunity in this form to bring up other areas in the guidelines that might need updates? Yeah, well, at the end. Oh, go ahead.
Nope. Well, sorry. Yes. These are our tour stops, and this is almost the last one. And then before I shut down this screen, we very much want to hear from anybody that says, hey, John, you scrolled right past this section. Can we go back up to it and talk about it? Is that what you were going to say, Tim?
Exactly. Another one on the F that's on the screen. Can the guidelines say should instead of must for the March submittals for extensions greater than 12 months? Extension requests are due in January for the March meeting, and a lot can happen on a project between January and the end of the fiscal year. Yeah, we're still working on this language a little bit because we totally understand that. And how we put it in there, maybe changing that word to should, or maybe there's a little more explanation of our expectations, because we understand that it's like, are you at 11, are you at 13, like, you know, something like that. So yeah, definitely we'll talk about that. A couple more. We have some support for the new language on E, hoping to eliminate post-fact time extensions. Yes, we definitely want to eliminate post-fact time extensions. Jen Buck also mentions we develop risk management plans for all of our projects. If a risk comes to fruition that requires an extension, it wouldn't be unforeseen if it is on the risk management plan. I strongly support the previous language that said time extensions must outline the specific circumstances rather than the unforeseen extraordinary circumstances. Yeah, I think we can talk about that. I mean, I think when we evaluate time extensions, you know, we're looking at everything that goes into it. But it's hard for us when we get time extensions specifically on the most recent batch, you know, we're only getting a small amount of information. So it's kind of, we're trying to evaluate it the best we can. And so I think the risk management plan references are definitely worthwhile as you guys are presenting things that have come up. So appreciate that comment.
I have a thought on that one. Not too different from what you said. Appreciate that comment. It's sort of connected to C up here, which is the initial. The commission may allow a one-time extension up to 20 months for unforeseen and extraordinary circumstances beyond the control of Caltrans, and only for period of delay directly attributed to the extra. So we were saying, hey, when you give a reasoning, it's got to show the requirement up here. I hear what you're saying, Jen. That's an interesting point about, look, we're planned to deliver this year, but there are some risks that we're tracking. And if these risks are realized, it's going to bump us out of this year. And when we go, oh, shoot, that risk was realized, and commission comes back and says, that's not unforeseen. You're saying, I know it wasn't unforeseen. I was tracking that risk and the risk was realized. I think we'll have to look at the language. If we don't say this here, we may want to consider changing that. If we say this up in C, I think we want to say the same thing down in H. But your point is a good one, and I think we'll have to talk about. I think, let me say this. People have told us we should be a little more clear on what we mean by unforeseen and extraordinary circumstances. And I think your comment helps highlight that maybe we should be a little more clear, because is a risk that you're tracking unforeseen? Like on one hand, no, but on one hand, maybe. So yeah, really good point. And maybe that does, maybe we should be a little more clear there so that down here, your point makes sense. Thanks, Jen. Okay. And then this last one, time extension amendment request must describe, oh, it's basically the same thing. Time extension requests have to describe that. Time extension amendment requests must describe the unforeseen and extraordinary circumstance leading to the additional delay beyond the previously approved time extension. So we added this just to say, look, when you come in for an amendment request, you should be describing, I thought I needed 6 months, but during that 6 months, this happened, and now we need more time. Kind of like what Kenny was describing about, you know, bid protests or something to say, like, we didn't know this before, and now we figured it out during that 6 months, and so we need this much time. Okay. Any other questions on this section before I move away? You guys don't see me? Looks like you don't see me.
Nope.
Okay. Okay, that. We have change management, just little changes updating the G12 resolution number. We're taking out a little thing here. This is, it says commission amendment. I honestly didn't even realize this was in here. Except for updates necessary at the end of PNED or PSNE, only updates for unforeseen and extraordinary circumstances beyond the reasonable control of Caltrans will be considered. This is for amendments, and I think it discourages proactive changes as necessary from Caltrans. We all did. So that's why we're proposing to remove that. We will amend a project if there's, if a better scope, comes about, or if this needs to be changed, or if stuff needs to be changed, it doesn't just have to be unforeseen and extraordinary circumstances. That date already passed, so took it out. This is about baseline agreements. Just trying to clarify that baseline agreements will not be required for emergency response projects delegated in our commission resolution G2111. Trying to be specific. It's these delegated major damage projects that don't need a baseline agreement. And then the last section I'll stop at, not an official tour stop, but I'll stop here. This is the report on SHOPP projects. It's the quarterly report we get from Caltrans. The report shall include a list of completed projects with the following information: identifier, location, type of work, phase, initially programmed, allocated, expended. It's a really helpful report in the quarterly report. It just gives a final conclusion of these projects that close out. It's great. We had put useful life of the project's primary output on there. This is difficult for Caltrans to report on. And so we're taking it out. We didn't feel like it added. We felt like the effort and value, the effort outweighed the value on that one. And then we added a little language here. Because it does say the report should include a section that provides a narrative for projects with a change in outputs between what we allocated and CCA. Like it was 30 culverts, and at CCA we delivered 20 culverts. And so it's supposed to have an explanation as to why we got less than what we paid for. And sometimes it's, hey, it was done under emergency project or something. So there are justifications. Cost changes shall be provided as requested. That is the end of our suggested changes. So before I open up to go back to any other sections, are there any questions on these last couple things we covered?
So John, we don't have specifically on those section, but we did receive a comment from an anonymous attendee. The question is section 21F. This will delay the project development if we have to wait for CTC approval to combine. Consider revising this to Caltrans is to submit a SHOPP amendment within 2 CTC meetings after the execution of the cooperative agreement.
Read that first part again. This will delay
the project development if we have to wait for CTC approval to combine. Consider revising to Caltrans is to submit a SHOPP amendment within 2 CTC meetings after the execution of the cooperative agreement. Maybe I can help answer that question, John. I think what the attendee is trying to say here is why consider allowing the submittal of the cooperative agreement after the allocation. And part of the reason that the CTC requires the cooperative agreement is to ensure that the project oftentimes is fully funded. Like if we make a partial allocation, let's say, for example, to construction, and a cooperative agreement has not been executed, then a commission has allocated partial funded to a project that's not fully funded. So until the cooperative agreement is executed, the project is not fully funded. So that's why our language is written the way it's written. And we strongly encourage that both the department and the local agencies work early as the project progresses to execute this cooperative agreement as early as possible to avoid any type of delay.
agreed. I would like to hear more from who that was to see if there is some solution we could come to so that we don't delay project delivery. Was there a name on that one, or is that anonymous?
It was anonymous, but we do have a hand raised from Jose Lewis. I'm not sure if it's about the same comment. Let me ask Jose Lewis to speak.
Yes, so I did not make that anonymous comment, but I guess, outside of this, keep your shop guidelines. Outside of this, I think I'm asking Caltrans and Timothy to help us with cooperative agreements. If they didn't take so long, I'm not even sure I'd be raising this as a comment. But I've seen cooperative agreements where outside of SHOPP, where the local agency in the cooperative agreement says they're paying 100% of the cost. And in such a case, that's a fully funded project. It's just a cooperative agreement is required for projects that are on or near or adjacent to state highways. At different times, I've wished that the cooperative agreement wasn't holding things up.
Yeah, I'd like to, and I guess if they're paying for 100%, you wouldn't need an allocation from us, huh?
Oh no,
but
sorry. I know this is a SHOPP meeting, but if I'm allocating CTC funds or even going for a federal authorization for federal funds, if I'm doing something related to a state highway, there will be a cooperative agreement.
Oh yeah.
Or an amended cooperative agreement at that if funding is changing. I appreciate that these things exist, and I'm looking for help in project delivery on them outside of this meeting.
You're like, can we get going on this project while we're fleshing out the co-op?
Yes.
Got it.
The question we have is, when are we starting the cooperative agreement process? And could it be started earlier? My understanding is Caltrans have a chart that kind of shows that cooperative agreement can be executed in as little as 60 or 90 days. Don't quote me on this. How long are you seeing the cooperative agreement taken for execution?
I don't have enough data, I don't think, to provide a range or sample.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Or I mean, that comment is, and you're right, that is a little bit more than, that's probably more on like local projects, but good input. And I'd like to have more conversations with anyone who thinks that this language will delay projects, because we think there's value in adding this, but we certainly want to hear both sides of, weigh the pros and cons effectively. So please, if you're the person that made, a comment about this will delay project development, we'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Okay.
John, before we go to the masses, we do have one other question that was asking about the 20 months. Why 20 months in the SHOPP?
Okay, I'll go back down there. Well, make it sick if I go back down there. The 20-month maximum in the SHOPP has always been the maximum of time extensions in the SHOPP, and that came from the STIP guidelines. And the STIP, or actually that STIP, 20 months for the STIP is in statute. And when the SHOPP guidelines were created, they were largely mimicked off of STIP guidelines and procedures. And so SHOPP has always had 20 months as the allowed time frame. Honestly, it seems a little bit long to me.
Some of the other programs are only 12.
Yeah, but for right now, it mimics the STIP at 20. If your comment is trying to talk us into less, we'd be we'd be interested in hearing that. What would happen is that would cause more projects to lapse. And then when that happens in the SHOPP, it's still a need that needs to be addressed. It gets reprogrammed back in, but maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, because if we're going to delay 20 months, there's a lot of escalation that happens. There's just a lot that changes. during a 20-month delay. And so that's a conversation we'd be willing to have, but we are not proposing to change that in this round of guidelines, at least yet. Okay, I really appreciate everybody's engagement. So thank you for writing in. Thank you for turning on your mics and talking. Anywhere else in the guidelines that we skipped over? Are there suggestions of things to add? Well, like I said, we're going to come back with future red line changes. So if you have questions or comments, we would love to hear them live at the workshop here, but we'll also be accepting written comments later on. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and see if any hands or Q&As come up about any other sections that we didn't cover.
So John, we have one additional written comment. It's in reference to section 10. So section 10 states, to the extent possible and cost effective, and where feasible, Caltrans shall incorporate complete street element. Can this language be more firm? Require a minimum percentage of total project cost to go to complete street elements? Or could there be a requirement to include minimum complete street network where the road type allows it? For example, all SHOPP project and conventional highways where the highway function as a main street through a town should include sidewalk, bike lanes, and crosswalks where those components are missing, fully funded by SHOPP, not by requiring local agencies to fund and maintain the complete street components.
Appreciate whoever wrote out that whole comment, because I'm going to want to like look back through that again. What they're referring to, just for everyone else, section 10 SHOPP preparation. What we have in here is in the guidelines a quotation straight out of Streets and Highways Code section 2030. And what it says is, pursuant to Street and Highways Code section 2030, to the extent possible and cost effective and where feasible, Caltrans shall, and then has A, B, C, D. A, B, and C are about climate change, other materials and stuff. C is the one, or D is the one that addresses streets, complete streets. So to the extent possible and cost effective and where feasible, Caltrans shall, another parenthesis, in the context of facility type, right of way, project scope, quality of nearby facilities, incorporate complete street elements, including but not limited to elements to improve the quality of bike and ped facilities, and then improve safety for all users of transportation facilities. I want to read again what the suggestion about making it a stronger requirement. The balance we always are needing to keep in view in the SHOPP is that there is not enough funding to cover all the needs. So we directly quoted statute here, and I think statute was carefully written to say, where feasible, all this stuff should be incorporated. And then also we have our reference to CAPTI down in the SHSMP to say, look, include this stuff wherever possible. If we were to say it's a requirement, that sort of oversteps the SHOPP's basic premise, which is it's prioritized based on the asset management plan and the state highway system management plan. So it's a very careful balance to say, yes, these are a priority. Yes, we should be looking at them and doing them wherever possible. Sometimes I think there are some situations where it could be cost prohibitive or right-of-way prohibitive or something like that. So that's the very difficult balance that I think the Street and Highways Code was having to wrestle with as they wrote this. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
So, John, I want to add to that as well. I think part of the reason the statute is written the way it is written, where it's feasible, because we don't want to go through communities and, like if there is limited right of way and it's going to have significant right of way impacts on communities, businesses, we want the communities to be able to provide their input through the process. If we say you should, and it ends up adversely impacting communities because now we're impacting businesses or more homes or displacing people, that's something where it has to be analyzed. And that's why there is that flexibility in the language to allow for that analysis and the engagement with the community. But that's, we'll look more at this, but that's just something that we considered because we just don't want to be creating a large impact in community without taking into consideration what we're trying to achieve there.
Agreed.
I'll just add one other thing in regards to kind of like requiring a percentage of a total project cost. You really need to look, Caltrans has a very rigorous process to develop where they're going to be having projects, and there's a purpose and need for that project. And even per this language, it says that they need to consider it, but they also need to consider the purpose and need of the project. So having a percentage of a cost I don't think that would be kind of going in the right direction. It's more like when you're out there for a project for a certain purpose and need, are there opportunities that they can consider as well? And that, like with Ahmed, he said, early on in the engagement to be able to look at that. I think that's really, we're trying to reflect here in the guidelines is that the expectations is that is being considered.
Yeah. And I mean, if there are projects where these elements are not being included, I think we would expect there to be very solid reasons as to why they're not being included, like some of the things that Tim and Ahmed are saying. So they should certainly be considered and included where possible. I think we're just a little hesitant to be forceful to say they must be included because they can't be included in all scenarios. Okay, any other questions about, and thanks for that written comment. And if you want to, well, we already have, if that was in the Q&A, then we'll have that and we can look at it a little bit more.
There is one that we didn't talk about. It says, how are adaptation priority 1 culverts and bridges being addressed in SHOPP projects? What about existing SHOPP projects further along in project life cycle? Example, culvert in poor condition is an adaptation priority 1. I think that's what that acronym is. In early design and not being proposed for upsizing. Upsizing replacement culvert key for climate resilience of the state highway system and could also provide co-benefit for wildlife connectivity. I mean, those types of things, I think Caltrans would be evaluating as part of their overall project delivery process. So I think that's really a question for Caltrans, not really for SHOPP guidelines. I hope I caught that correctly, but I feel like that's a project delivery planning type evaluation before, or either during planning or as they're going through the environmental process. Please feel free to elaborate if you want to. We do have a couple more comments coming in. I don't see any hands raised. What if Caltrans knows the community is in full support and there's plenty of right-of-way, et cetera, and the cost isn't high at all? I think that's related to incorporating complete streets elements. I feel like we've addressed that. That's really for Caltrans to be documenting and explaining if they aren't able to incorporate.
I would agree. If the community is in full support, there's plenty of right-of-way, the cost isn't high, I feel like that meets this section on the screen that says if it's possible, if it's cost effective, if it's feasible, and and it makes sense in the context, Caltrans shall, I mean, it says shall at the top, shall incorporate these elements. So if it checks all those boxes that you were mentioning in the chat, it would be hard to understand why they're not incorporated. especially I would say, unless they can't afford it, but you even said if the cost isn't high at all. So I think that would be a prime example where we would expect that they would be incorporated.
We have another one. There's mentions that 10C, which I believe is
That's
it's
this.
further up, but 10C could add something about co-benefits for wildlife connectivity, more cost effective when upgrading for climate resilience to also consider wildlife connectivity at the same time. Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I think that the evaluation should happen while they're doing their hydrologic or hydraulic analysis as part of, you know, the purchase of that culvert. So I don't know that that's something that would need to be written into SHOPP guidelines. That'd be more Caltrans evaluation of the locations. I wouldn't say that it's like it's not ineligible.
Yeah, and I think what it's saying is like maybe consider adding something like, hey, look, it's not only good for climate change, but it's good for wildlife. We're killing two birds with one stone if we upgrade these for climate change and it includes wildlife connectivity at the same time.
I see that. Thanks, John. I hadn't scrolled to that one specifically. I guess we could add some language there just kind of as reference.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a note to that.
And then Jeannie Woodwaller says, I'll just flag Senate Bill 960 again, since it's very relevant to this discussion about complete streets. Happy to follow up to discuss the bill with you and how it might impact the guidelines. Yeah, more than happy to talk about, you know, potential legislation. I don't know that, I don't know where 960 is in the approval process or the adoption process. So, but more than happy to continue talking about it to see if there's relevant changes for the guidelines. That's all I have in Q&A so far.
Okay. I'm taking good notes. Thank you for all your input and comments. I think we're gonna have a lot to think about after this. Nothing more? Well, why don't we, oh, I see that, Jeannie. Assembly floor, hopefully going to governor for signature next week. All right, well, we'll keep our eye out. Ahmed, if I stop sharing, we can go back to that. We have like 2 more presentation slides, which just kind of show what our next steps are and future engagement opportunities. So before
So Jean, before we move, we have one more question. And I believe the person that provided Jared, you can provide confirmation. I think what you're asking is the CTC still planning to adopt the SHOPP at the October meeting?
Oh, that's on our next slides. Thank you for the segue, Jared. Let me stop sharing. So this is kind of what we already did. And okay. So here's our next steps. Like I said before, but I'll say it officially and we want it on the screen. We will be accepting, if you want to submit written comments, we would like to have those by next Friday. Because our goal, if you look down in the next steps, our plan is to have another public workshop where we can send red lines out ahead of time and say, hey, these are the things, so you guys can, you know, take a week or 2 to actually process through them. But it's going to be kind of cramped on time because we would like to go to the October 2024 commission meeting with draft guidelines and then final guidelines in December. And when we go with draft, the goal is to have pretty close to final, because that's our opportunity to say, hey, commissioners, we worked with Caltrans, we worked with regional agencies, we worked with other stakeholders. We worked with the general public. We worked with all these people. This is what we came to. Now, do you have any other comments for us, commissioners? If we have to tweak, then we go to our final based on their input. So our goal is to be pretty final by draft. And our plan to get there is to go, okay, if you have written comments, get them to us by August 30th, which is next Friday, as in a week from this Friday. And then we are planning on hosting another workshop in late September where we can one more time kind of go, okay, thanks for all the input on our last workshop. Thanks for the written comments. We took what you said. This is how we incorporated what you said. And you guys can applaud or say, it's not really what we were getting at. And then hopefully we can roll right into our draft guidelines at the October 2024 commission meeting. So that actually is, you can leave this on the screen, Ahmed, so people can keep it, but our only slide after this is thank you and our contact information. So I'll pause. If there's any questions related to process, specifics, anything, I don't want to end without, if someone still had something on the tip of their tongue or questions about anything. So I'm going to pause.
So John, we have one written question, and I'm not sure, maybe we want to highlight what we're doing prior to the next workshop in September. The question is, are these draft guidelines available, or should we provide comments on the 2022 version?
Oh. What you're saying is what I showed on the screen available so that you can look at the red lines we have right now and make your comments on that? Or should you just be making your comments on the current adopted 2022 version? That's a good question.
So John, just maybe this will help refresh your memory. I think we're planning to post these red lines prior to the next workshop. So that will provide the opportunity for people to provide input on the current version. For now, we can accept comments or any other comments or changes on the 2022 version.
I think that's fine. The only thing is, if there's a specific comment on something that we presented on something that was new today, it might be good to get okay, if you're that person, send us an email. What do you guys think about that? Tim, do you have thoughts on that?
It's a really good comment, because I was trying to think about it. Really what we were looking for is like, if there's something that's specific, that were on the existing guidelines that we should be considering that we haven't gone over today. But then we're going to get the red line version of probably a couple more tweaks on the red line version you went over today. We'll make that available for a couple weeks before we have the next workshop. But I understand, like, maybe they're interested in something that we showed them today as tweaking.
I mean, we showed it today. There are certainly some things. I think here's a reason for hesitancy in my voice. There's some things we showed today. Nothing's a secret, but there's some things we showed today that commenters were like, what's this mean? What's that mean? There was some lack of clarity. Like, I'm thinking of the managed lanes thing we added to the eligibility. It seemed like that raised as many questions as it did answers.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt your
go ahead.
I was thinking, we have a recording of this. I was thinking, since we went through all of your, what did you call them? Bus stops or whatever. Maybe we just ask for comments on the 22, that's the approved guidelines. And then if they have some other questions based on the red lines that we went through, they can take a look at the recording and then provide some additional comments on that. And then we will get out the red line version prior to the next workshop as soon as we can, so that they'll have time. They can actually make, some specific questions after that.
I think that's a great idea. We'll make sure we post the recording as soon as possible. I don't know if the cloud takes time to process this or whatever, but I think in the next day or so, we should be able to post the recording. Maybe let's call it day or two, because our web team might need time to upload, but we'll get that recording posted as soon as possible, which should have our draft of changes. Make it on that and the 2022 guidelines, and then it'll be after August 30th, where new red lines will come out, and then we'll send out an actual like Word document with changes. I think that's a good middle ground.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking that. A couple other comments on here, right, Ahmed?
Yes, we got. What will be your deadline for comments on the public guidelines with red lines before October CTC meeting by November?
I think we'll probably do something similar to this, where we have a workshop and we say, okay, we want comments by blah, this date. We're going to be, if we have a workshop mid, to late mid-September, we're going to be pushing up against when we have to get book items and stuff completed for the October meeting. So right now we're saying comments in a week and a half. If we send red lines out and then we have a workshop, we might be saying comments either due by the workshop or due like the Friday after the workshop or something, a little bit more condensed. But that's probably what we'll do. I don't imagine we would say earlier than the workshop, but maybe if we have a workshop by the end of that week or something like that. We want as much time as possible for people to be able to give input, but we also want to get these things out on the street. Just not kicking the can down forever. So we're trying to reach that balance. Okay, anything else?
Let me just double check one more time. Just want to make sure I have all the I want to make sure there's no hand raised. All right, we have no hand raised. There are no addition. We have one more written comment that said, in respect of any staff, I would suggest allowing at least 2 weeks to review and comment back to you.
Okay, I'll take that in, we'll take that in consideration when we're sending out our red lines. So our goal, that's a good comment. And what we'll try to do when we send out our red lines is to send them out 2 weeks before the workshop. Even as I hear myself say that, I'm like, oh man, we better get going on these things. But if it's not 2 weeks before the workshop, then maybe we'll make sure it's at least 2 weeks from whenever they're sent out until comments come back to us, something like that. Because I appreciate that comment and acknowledge that there's a lot of workload being balanced. Okay.
All right.
Well, you can hit the last slide just in case people are excited about our contact information. It's on the website too. Really, really appreciate everybody showing up to this. Appreciate the different views that are expressed. The SHOPP's a diverse program. There's a lot of diverse needs, and there's not funding to fund everything. And so we want to know that we're taking care of our transportation system. We're accomplishing as many needs as possible and touching as many things. And so the best way I think we can do that is to hear from as many people as possible. So thanks everyone for your time. Almost exactly 2 hours here. And we'll see you again at the next one. Bye.
Thank you.